I'm delighted to welcome Jeffrey Auld to this presentation today. Jeffrey is the CEO of Serinus Energy PLC, an AIM and Warsaw listed D&P oil and gas business with a focus on Tunisia and Romania. Jeffrey, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me today.
Thanks for having me.
Jeffrey, as you know, the reason I've asked you to join me in this discussion today is to present your views on a topic we believe is of interest to the wider natural resources sector, our future workforce, the youth in natural resources. It's a broad topic and one we've reached out to many interested parties to contribute to, so A-level students, career advisors, professionals, academics, etc. And we're looking to gather and share the views of this wide-ranging group of contributors to provide insight to the natural resources sector and how we all can attract future talent to work in what is an exciting and important but rapidly changing sector. Could you please share with our viewers a brief potted history of your own personal background in the sector and how you came to be in the role you are in today?
Well, embarrassingly, it's almost a 30-year career in resources. I grew up in Calgary in Canada. My father was in oil and gas, so I show very limited creativity in my career selection. I went to university in Canada, and right out of university started working for oil companies. I then moved to London and managed to get a job with one of the London independent producers to do new ventures work for them. They paid for me to go to business school. So apparently I was doing something okay. And then, like any good business school student, I resigned on the day I graduated and I went to Goldman Sachs. I was 18 months in London with the Energy and Power advisory and M&A team. And then I got sent to New York for 5.5 years. When I left New York and left Goldman, I picked up with a former client and became an executive in a New York listed 165,000 barrels a day in Kazakhstan. And I was responsible for selling that to CNPC for $4.2 billion. I then went back into banking, and I was head of Canaccord's Energy and Power Group, and then latterly Macquarie's European EMEA Energy Group. I left banking in 2013, and I was doing bits and pieces of consulting. And the shareholders of Serinus called me up and asked me to if I would step in and help them essentially rebuild the business. So that's how I came to be involved with a junior oil and gas company.
Fascinating. What do you most enjoy about working in the sector after 30 years of doing so?
There's some fantastic things. Energy, particularly of the resources, is very political. And so you're always dealing with the government relations, the needs of the host governments, wherever you are, and the ability throughout my career to travel to some really strange and wonderful places. And I think over the years I've done transactions or tried to do business in 63 different countries. So it's been, it's been fantastically interesting. The actual, I come to natural resources not being a subsurface technical person, but I guess after 30 years, I probably have earned myself some sort of undergraduate degree in the technical side. And so there's a lot of technology that's used. There's a lot of science that's used that can be utterly fantastic, fascinating. Simple things like, the fluid dynamics through a gas plant. You learn all sorts of really interesting things. You just pick it up along the way. So it remains interesting. It remains challenging, and you just get to do a lot of very, very intellectually stimulating work.
Do you see it as quite a progressive sector, or do you think it's not changed that dramatically in your career?
Oh, no. I mean, I think it's changed dramatically. At one time, oil and gas was the industry that used the most computing power. I'm sure the Googles of the world have changed that. But no, it's changed dramatically. I guess the vision of just a pump jack out in a field pulling oil out of the ground is something that probably will never change. But the means of accessing that, and the means of lowering the risk of your capital allocation have changed dramatically, um, with lots of new technology, lots of new science involved. Simple things like using nanotechnology when you're drilling a well. These are things that are springing up all the time, and that's sort of what I say. You're constantly being intellectually challenged because it is constantly changing.
I think that intellectual challenge point is really interesting. How do you see how would you help the youth of today really understand those developments that you've talked about? Just hearing that the sector used to use more computing power than probably Google did 10 years ago is quite eye-opening, isn't it, when you think about the youth of today and their perception of where technology it was or did come from and is used.
Yeah, I think, how would I explain it to people? I mean, it was sort of physically explained to me, in sort of the mid 2000s when I was lucky enough to be in Houston, and one of the majors let me go into a 3D seismic visualization room. And this is long before our PlayStations had, headsets to
Hmm.
to have virtual reality. But the industry had essentially virtual reality headsets that you could put on, and you could walk through the seismic, and essentially walk through the rocks 3 or 4 kilometers below the surface of the earth. And that now is fairly commonplace. So you can talk about some of the developments that I've seen in my career, and some of the developments that we've seen, very recently. Drilling a well isn't like it used to be. Drilling a well is highly sensitive, highly, the technology that goes in behind it. One of our wells was drilling last year, and I was lucky enough to be there for when they perforated the well. So they put holes in the well so that the oil could flow, or the gas could flow. And we managed to get that perforation tool within 3 millimeters of the target, and that was 1,000 meters down through a tube that runs through rock. And so things like that, the anecdotal stories about what they're actually doing to get to that very simplistic view of a pump jack pumping oil on the surface. I think that's how you describe how the business has really evolved.
Do you think there's enough knowledge that is shared by the industry for the general public across the board that helps them really understand how much the sector has changed?
No, I mean, I think that's one of the things that you know the industry has done a very poor job of. The industry in general. There's a belief in a large segment of the society that you can just, hey, we're going to go green tomorrow. We just don't need to use this. And that's the highest level of failing for an industry, is not explaining what we do, how carefully we do it, um, how few accidents there actually are, given the scale of what we do and how much energy we provide for the world, uh, the statistical likelihood of an accident is so low. Now, of course, when they do happen, they're very visible, and they're not attractive. But I think the industry has done a pretty poor job of getting the general population to understand how much goes into producing heat and light, and just energy for your iPad. It's been a failing, I think.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think anecdotally, if you look at what Joe Public believes the sector is to
Mhm.
what those of us who work in very different areas of the sector actually see, it is completely different. There's a different side to this story.
Yeah, I mean, we all can tell stories about going to dinner parties, especially in 2008 and 2009, when I was a banker and I was an oil and gas banker. You know, you ended up being a social pariah,
Yeah.
and you sat there watching everyone at the table, uh, who consumed your product to a great degree, but everyone hated your product. So it's a bit of a It's a weird one. We have a product that everyone consumes. They probably don't even know how much they consume the product, and they all hate it. So yeah, it's a real challenge. And I think your topic of youth and natural resources. One of the biggest challenges is to show people that we're not monsters. We all care about the same things everyone else cares about. And in my role running a company, I spend a great deal of time focusing on the environmental, focusing on making us as efficient as possible, because I'm no different than anyone else. I have the same concerns about sustainability and carbon emissions that everyone does. So I think that's a real hard one, and we need to do a much better job of communicating on that front.
And what kind of thing do you think the industry should do? So obviously there's you see there's lots of TV adverts from the majors at the moment where they're showing themselves with this sustainable, slightly greener side than perhaps they showed themselves having 10 years ago. Do you think
Yeah,
that's the way the industry should go?
I think that's part of it. To be honest, I think the industry lost the fight before we knew it even started. And so we're trying to crawl back from a position where uh, a visionary wouldn't have let us get to. So yeah, I think we have to show that as companies we're all trying to transition. Um, but I think we also have to show that actually there is no magic bullet where we can just stop using oil and gas, and that we have to transition off of it. And to do that, we have to make sure that the production and the consumption that we're currently doing is as efficient as possible. Um, and it's not just on the production side. It's a consumption side. We all tell stories, and I'm sure as a father I do it. Turn the lights off, turn the heat down. I mean, but these are fundamental little pieces of consumption can do as much as the industry can. And so that message has to get out there too, that okay, the industry will do everything it can do, and we have, and shareholders are asking us these questions, so we're responding, not simply because our shareholders are, but like I say, we're all concerned about these things. But equally, we have to get the message across that consumption is flagrant, and overconsumption of a resource where we don't really need it, is one of the things we can really address. I grate every time I see someone go up and push the button for the automatic door and know that a little bit of coal, gas, or oil is
Mhm.
being burned to create the electricity to run that door, and yet no one ever thinks about that. So I think an education on both fronts. Education's on how the businesses, how the producers are getting more sustainable and focused on this, but also on how society in general needs to focus on this.
Yeah, 100% with you. 100% with you. I'd either turn the lights off, turn the heating down as well.
Yeah, I'm sure my
Absolutely.
kids. I've turned into my own father. Turn the lights off. But I think when you actually produce it, you're far more aware of of the value of it, and so it's not that we can't afford to have the heating up with the lights on, but I think we respect the value of the product more because we're the ones who produce it and back to our first portion of the conversation, know how much it does take to get it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got to get into schools and help people learn the other side of the story from very early on in their education.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the risk of being seen to be big oil propaganda or a self interest. We need to make sure that it's not just us. It's governments need to help with the consumption side, because if I just showed up in a classroom and started preaching about um, how great the business is and how what a good job we're doing, it will be dismissed as self-interest and just a bad oil company trying to get away with what it's been doing, and that's not the case. So it's not something I think the industry can do itself. It's something that you know in general society, and we need to move to a place where we're educating, where we're trying to reduce consumption, and of course we're trying to transition to something that's more sustainable.
And I guess also showing people how diverse the career opportunities are for working in the natural resources sector. So it's not just rednecks. it genuinely is, finance,
Yeah.
engineering, geos, the list
I
goes
might
on.
actually be a redneck. I'm a cowboy from Calgary. So, um, look, one of the best things about the industry I work in is the very, very high level of the quality of people I work with. So, an engineer doesn't just pop out of school and become a great engineer. It takes a lot of education, and then it takes a lot of experience. Our finance guys, I mean, the team I have, that they are very, very intelligent. They're thoughtful. They're commercial, and I'm blessed to have had spent a career working with very, very smart people. And I don't know that that's the industry, but I don't know it's not. I think that actually the industry does attract bright people. The industry attracts people who do like the challenges. So I think we tend to end up with a very, very diverse and an interesting group to be working with, and very smart. I'm
Yeah,
I'm never I'm never the smartest guy in the room.
I'm with you again. I'm never the smartest lady in the room either. So in this sector, do you see a shortage of a certain type of skill at the moment that some of the maybe the Gen Z people can look to fill and should aspire to fill?
Well, I'll be perfectly blunt. It's always been an industry that has failed to attract women, and I think the perception of a bunch of muddy and oily guys sitting on a on a on a drilling rig probably isn't the perception that we really should be known by. And then, so that's always something we're always trying to make sure we try to have diversity. I'm the father of two girls. I want equality more than anyone does. Um, so we work hard for that, and I think my colleagues in the industry would say the same thing. And then in terms of professions that I think we're missing, I think engineers are the really critical piece that we're starting to lose. Because if you go into a form of engineering, I think there's less and less people picking chemical engineering or petroleum engineering. Mechanical, electrical, these things are attracting more people. So your geologists will always be limited on what they do. They look at rocks, so we're always going to have people who want to be geologists, and those people will always want to look at rocks. Finance people, they're probably the most transferable of the skill sets. Finance person, can work in lots of different industries, but the petroleum engineer, the subsurface engineer, the facilities engineer who wants to work on wind farms instead of working on gas plants. I think the engineers are the critical component. And if I were to try to look forward and say where we would have shortages and thus where we would have greater demand, and let's be honest, greater demand is greater compensation, I would say it's the engineering fields.
To have female engineers all over the place.
Well, what, that'd be great. That would be great. Maybe not on the decks of drilling rigs getting splashed with oil, but uh,
It's fine.
yeah,
It's fine.
yeah.
It'll work for some people, I'm sure. Absolutely. So I don't know how old your kids are, but mine kind of are teenagers, and I would hope that what they have seen me do in the sector um, is inspirational. That they might want to consider the sector. They might not want to be an engineer, but something around the edges of the sector. Do you see that? The youth that you come across, your girls' friends, are they showing a vague interest in the sector or converting the sector to more of a sustainable sector?
Well, I did the courageous thing, and I took my daughters to our gas plant in Romania. Um, so the team got them coveralls with their names on it, hard hats with their names on it. Took them around the gas plant, showed them exactly what was going on, and that was my attempt to sort of show them what we did, how clean it is. I mean, there isn't a speck on a properly run facility.
Hmm.
There's not a speck. Um, and they had a fantastic time. But I'm afraid I don't think I convinced either of them. One of them wants to be an investment banker, and the other wants to be a writer. So I didn't manage to convince either of them, but I hope that they would go back, and I think they did show a lot of the pictures to their friends, and I think that's sort of seeing that it's not what you think it is. It's it's way different. So no, I haven't managed to convince my daughters, but I hope that some of their conversations might have removed some of that sort of bias against the industry that we see right now.
So to wrap up, what advice would you give to young, talented people who are interested in working in the sector about how they can get involved and start looking at the diverse range of careers that are out there connected to natural resources?
Whenever I get answered a question like that, I say one thing. I say work hard, because the only known way to be guaranteed to get wealthy is to work really hard. But to get into the space, yeah, you have to work hard. You have to be um, good in your place, because we still as an industry have the luxury of picking very, very good candidates. So work hard, be good at what you do. Try a lot of different things. I've seen some great engineers turn into really great economists, as they have to work through the economics of what they're doing. I've seen people move around places in the industry. So I would say at very early spaces, try to find a place and try to convince whomever your boss is to move you around and let you see some of the places. I sort of I don't think coming out of business school I knew what an M&A banker was, and I sort of fell into a great place that I happened to be very good at. But if I hadn't done a whole bunch of things and tried a whole bunch of things, I might not have found the place that I was good. So I'd say work hard and try a whole bunch of different things. And if someone tells you you can't do it because you're not a geologist, tell them they're wrong, and study really hard and learn. But try lots of different things, I think, would be the advice.
Fantastic. Jeffrey, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thanks for having me again.